No matter the time, morning, afternoon, or evening, any time is a good time to have coffee with the mayor. So let's join Mayor Steve Widmyer as he goes in search of the people, places, and events, both current and historic, that make our community unique.
And you're coming up.
Welcome to another episode of Coffee with the Mayor. I'm Steve Widmyer, and I am here with my great co-host. Council President Woody McEvers is here with us today, and we have a fine gentleman that's joined us today. We have County Commissioner Chris Fillios. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And we have over your term in office and my term in office, we've developed a great working relationship.
Absolutely.
And we are very proud that the city and the county are working hand in hand. It doesn't work that way throughout the state of Idaho. There's some controversies between cities and counties.
That's true.
But we have a great relationship, I feel, and in large part to your efforts. So just kind of wanted to go back to when you made the decision and you said, you know what, I'd like to be a county commissioner. I'm going to throw my hat in and I'm going to run for it. Maybe just talk about the decision that you made that you wanted to be part of county government.
Sure. Well, before making the decision, I'd already been serving as a highway district commissioner. And I assumed that position initially in 2011, and then I got reelected 4 years later. And someone approached me after a political meeting, and it was back, I guess it would have been the spring of or winter of 2016, and said, would you consider running? And I thought about it, and I said, well, okay, let me discuss it with my wife. Let's think it through. And public service is always an interesting challenge. And I had run before, back in 2010, and I came in third, each of us having gotten over 30% of the vote. Jay Nelson, of course, won that and went on to serve a 4-year term. And I figured, well, if I look at the position and I look at the demands of that position, whether educationally, from an educational standpoint, a vocational standpoint, I felt that I had the necessary wherewithal to go and serve and correctly and accurately and faithfully serve the people of this county. I'd spent the first half of my life in the tech industry, making recommendations for projects, some of them very high value projects, working for people who were very highly educated, people with PhDs and from some of the top schools in the country, then got into the real estate industry and felt that the combination of my various skills would serve the county well, and so I made the decision. Now, part of the challenge was I built a good real estate business. I'm also licensed as an appraiser, and so my wife basically had to wear two hats. She was already helping me with the real estate, but at that time spending most of her time appraising. So now she wears the two hats, and that was part of the challenge. That's what made the decision challenging, but I have no regrets, none whatsoever.
Okay.
You talked about political. There's a difference there. It is a political job. I mean, explain to me your perspective of political.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So the job is defined as partisan. Okay. And of course, you have to secure the support of your respective party. In my case, Republican. Where it gets political, I think, is where we venture into those decisions that are more ideological. The classic one would be the opt-out. There are those who argue that, it's a question of liberty. It is my property. I choose to build what I choose to build, and if I don't want to abide by mandatory building codes, I shouldn't have to. And then there's the other side of the argument that says, well, okay, I understand that, but we have had building codes. We are, by the way, considered an urban county, one of 6 in the state. 70% of our population is in the cities. And as such, we need to preserve those mandates that deal with health and safety. And in fact, when you talk about we talk about building codes. Building codes are addressed in the health and safety section of Idaho statute. And Idaho statute says a community can have building codes or not. And we happen to have had them before they were revoked a year ago by the prior code. So when you listen to the arguments as we did when we held the 2 public hearings, the 1 year ago that established the opt-out and the one last month that revoked it, you'll hear a lot of the philosophical and ideological arguments, people quoting the Founding Fathers. So that's one example where you can see the political interplay. So when I listen to an argument where somebody says, by golly, it's my property, I'm going to do as I please, the other side of that says, well, okay, if you want to take that argument to its logical extreme, why don't we eliminate stop signs? A lot of people run them anyway, and some don't come to a full stop. So how far do you want to take this argument? In that case, it gets political. Another example would be land use. So somebody might come before us and appeal for a zone change or a subdivision. And once again, now you're getting into the property rights aspect. So how do we balance property rights with what is within the general benefit of the community as a whole? So that gets somewhat partisan in the decision making. It shouldn't, though, because when we deal with those situations, and let me back up a little bit here. When we deal with those situations, we are acting in what's considered a quasi-judicial capacity, and I think you do the same, okay? So we have to act and behave as judges. So whatever ideological leanings we might have individually as commissioners, we still have to approach that case with an open mind. And by the way, backing up, as I said earlier, our job basically, think of the 3 branches of the federal government. We are that rolled into a group of 3 county commissioners. We have administrative functions, we have legislative, and then we have quasi-judicial. And when it's quasi-judicial, as you experience when someone comes before you for, whether it be a zone change or a subdivision, we have to act and behave as judges. And that's where the political ideology almost has to be pushed aside. If it's legislative, an example of that would be the opt-out, where we're looking at passing or repealing an ordinance, then we can advocate, as our legislators do, that we elect to, our Boise, our state government. They go and they advocate for positions. We're free to do the same. Administrative is a little bit different. That has to do with organization and reorganization. It's not quite as formal.
I think that's interesting ideology, and we don't deal with that like that, right?
Some, but I don't think at that extent.
That level, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, fascinating. Fascinating.
So Chris, you represent a large group of people, because not only do you, I think sometimes when people think county, they just think of people that live in the rural parts, the unincorporated parts.
Absolutely.
But Woody and I serve the citizens of Coeur d'Alene. You also serve the citizens of Coeur d'Alene. You serve the citizens of Post Falls and Rathdrum, and as you said, there's a large percentage of the people that you serve live in cities.
You're right.
So it's not just the county, the people that live in unincorporated areas that you serve.
That's very true. The classic example is CityLink. Okay, CityLink is operated largely with federal funds. And the county had to secure those federal funds because in order to get those funds from the Federal Transportation Administration, you have to have a population of over 100,000 people, when none of our cities do. So we as a county stepped in, secured those funds, received gratefully contributions from Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, and Hayden, the 3 cities that we serve. So to your point, Mayor, we're operating very cooperatively. We are actually serving our cities. And in case folks are wondering, we're building, for example, the Transit Center right now, which is a 2,700 square foot building, approximately $2 million, 1.6 federal funding, 75,000 and possibly increasing, thank you, because of increased contributions from the cities. The rest comes from the county, whether in direct cash contribution or in kind. So we are here to serve the cities. Another example, and frankly, the cities pay taxes to the county. When you get your county tax bill, there's a county component there, which is very interesting. We've actually had commissioners, county commissioners, explore the possibility of keeping certain votes, like for example, voting on the opt-out, restricted to just the people in the unincorporated areas. Well, how can you do that when city residents pay taxes to the county? That would be taxation without representation. Once again, it's a little bit of ideology creeping in, okay? But yes, we work very cooperatively with our 3 cities, and we have as much responsibility and duty to the citizens of the cities as we do to the unincorporated areas. Absolutely.
In regards to that your last thought, we're all paying the county, but the cities have we kind of supersede our codes would go
Yes.
over. So when you built your jail
Yes.
in the city, or you come under the city codes,
That is
building
correct.
codes, whereas the folks outside that would rather not, they're only under the county code. So once you're in a city, you're kind of
Yeah, we're governed by your laws and rules. Absolutely.
Gotcha.
That's
Okay.
right. And we paid the necessary fees, the hookup fees and whatnot,
Right.
to build the jail. And incidentally, what I should point out regarding the jail, that was targeted. We budgeted $12.5 million. That money came out of fund balance, so there was no direct hit to the public. We came in on time, $1 million under, and
the good old days.
the good
I'm
old
sorry.
days, right.
Oh my
And
goodness.
contractually, we were obligated to split that with the contractor. That was his incentive, which we did.
Oh, wow.
So it went 50-50. We saved $500,000. They saved $500,000. And they did a beautiful job as a Sletton Industries. They were the prime. They employed many locals as subprimes. So
So a beautiful job. We have a beautiful jail. I never
Or an
thought of it that
expansion,
way.
yeah, well-
I love that.
and it's actually improved the overall efficiency of the operation. So that's.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
But yes, in the city, we're governed by your rules and regulations. Absolutely.
So Chris, let's talk about the downtown campus. And
Yes, sir.
You've made a commitment to the downtown campus, and there's been talk in the past of, okay, maybe we should move the downtown campus, maybe to the fairgrounds area or
Absolutely.
somewhere like that. But there are millions upon millions of dollars invested in the downtown campus. And I think that you have plans for doing some more things, and maybe talk about the downtown campus, some facility and building plans that you're moving forward to in the future.
Okay, so you're right. We are reiterating our commitment to the downtown campus. As we speak, Architects West is in the process and has been funded to go basically interview our elected officials and department heads to get a better feel for where we expect to be downtown within the next 15 to 20 years in terms of our personnel and facilities. We know that we're going to have to increase our court facilities because justice services is probably the single fastest growing segment of our operation. There was talk of relocating the county. This board, thanks to Commissioner Leslie Duncan and Bill Brooks, we've put a stop to that. We are, in fact, budgeting for, on a loose basis, approximately $6.5 million going forward to our fiscal 20 budget to build 1 and possibly 2 buildings downtown. The first, I shouldn't say the first one, but the first targeted, if you will, would likely be the corner of Foster and Government, the old Romer building, which, as you know, we're offering for someone to relocate. So that would be a likely location for one building. If a second one is required, that would likely fall between our current administration building and the new courthouse. Which one would come first, who knows? But we're in the process of making that determination. And that does reiterate our commitment to downtown. We do have, and we're allocating the funds, at least on an assigned basis, to do that.
And the county does have some services that are in other locations, and,
Yes.
and you're paying rent on those, where this investment in a new building would allow you to move people from a rented facility into a county-owned facility.
That's exactly right. Our public defender, headed by Ann Taylor, it's a group of approximately 43 people, are currently in rented quarters off Route 95 in La Crosse. That's costing us, between rent and related costs, about $10,000 a month. So that would be one group being targeted for relocating into one of the buildings. And the other thing with that organization, which is interesting, is we're hoping for a substantial increase in the grant money for that organization in fiscal 20. So we might be hiring additional defense attorneys. And so that's one area that'll be targeted, and there are others. And so that's what we're looking at.
You know, it's interesting we talk about, and these are just necessary parts of government. So we talk about the expansion of the jail, and then you talk about the need for additional public defenders
Right.
and more funding,
Right.
and that is a not a fun part of the job, but it's an absolutely necessary part of the job as a complete role in public safety.
That's correct. And actually, we have now about 835 employees. Over the past 5 to 6 years, we've hired approximately 7 per year. And speaking of public safety, the target was to hire 23 sworn officers, if you will. I shouldn't say 23 sworn, it's about 18 sworn and 5 control room operators for the expansion. We're still short of about 4 to 5 people. And again, regarding the area of public safety, you know, people are obviously aware of the situation of our losing, you know, sworn deputies to Coeur d'Alene or Post Falls or Spokane Valley or County, and or the city of. But in reality, the turnover in that organization is only about 2 to 2.5% per year among the sworn, among the patrol and the detention. However, the challenge is hiring and getting them up to speed. And we, for the jail expansion, we received over 5,000 applications. We had a nationwide effort thanks to our former HR director, Sky Mercer. And we could only hire and get people through the background checks possibly 2 to 3%. Oh, wow. That's how challenging it is to get sworn personnel, deputies.
Wow. You know, we've met and we've worked together on EMS
Yes, sir.
together, and so we've gotten to kind of brainstorm off the record and stuff. So you guys are getting ready to televise your meetings.
Yes, we are.
So that people can try and understand how you guys work. We do it, and the other cities do it, and so people start learning. Your structure is a little different.
Correct.
Right? I know you're practicing right now. They're working on your audio and pictures, and you got Nancy working on it. Is that something that, I think it's something you would look forward to? I wondered if the other commissioners are buying into it, and is it comfortable yet, or is it just you're doing your meeting and you don't notice?
Yes.
Yes,
good. Well,
yes to the first part.
Okay.
We're all bought in.
Yeah.
Everybody agrees it has to be done. We're testing right now. The system is installed. Nancy will be monitoring and controlling the console. Unfortunately, we can't get into some of the more fancy aspects of it, like the split screen, but you know, it will focus on we 3 commissioners. It'll also focus on the audience, if you will, and whoever happens to be speaking. We are looking at potentially expanding the video to the boardroom, the big boardroom downstairs, 1A, 1B, for whenever we happen to hold hearings down there as well. We haven't actually funded that yet, but yes, we are going forward.
Is that
with the
realistic
televising.
for you guys? I mean, you have to see how it goes, right?
Yeah, I think it's fairly realistic because all we're really looking at for downstairs at this point are the actual cameras and the cabling.
Okay.
You know, because now that we have the console, we have the software, it's essentially a marginal expense.
And you have to sort of pick and choose what you televise, because your business goes all the time.
That is correct.
Right.
Last year, independent of one-on-one meetings that I might have held with constituents or other people, I had 400 meetings. Clearly, we're not going to televise 400 board meetings, but what we'll televise is our standard business meeting, which is on Tuesday. We have debrief on Monday. As you are, we're going into the budget cycle, so we'll be probably broadcasting most of the budget deliberations. So we'll be having to exercise some judgment, but we'll be as transparent as we can.
I think it's a great start. You know, again, we've all learned what we do. Our structure's a little different, you know,
Right.
but yeah, you can't do them
And
all.
we appreciate your help and Jeff's in
Well, like
helping
I said-
plant the seed and getting us going. So
Yeah,
thank
well,
you
and
so
I
much
think
for that.
that's been the whole idea behind Coeur d'Alene
Yeah.
TV, is to try and make it community rather than just
Absolutely.
us. And that's why we reach out. I think one of your guys said, "What's in it for you guys?" And I go, "Well, more programming,
Absolutely.
you know, and that kind of stuff. And we're all here together for the
We
same
are.
folks.
We are.
Just different borders, right?" But, well, that's interesting.
One of the things that the city is facing, and I know the county is facing, Post Falls, Rathdrum, growth.
Yes, sir.
I believe that we have such a wonderful area that people want to live here.
Yes.
And they are coming here and building homes, people are building office buildings for people to work in. Kootenai Health is expanding, so there's a lot of growth going on. What's the county's vision and growth? We have other partners that we have to deal with and work with. School District 271 is one. You have a lot of school districts that in the county, and the city of Coeur d'Alene, as well as the other cities with School District 271, are going to be working together much closer on growth, because that's such a huge issue. So maybe just talk about growth and some things that the county is doing to address that and talk about that.
Okay. I know others have said it, certainly before me. You can't really control growth. Can you manage it? That's even a tough challenge. We can hopefully accommodate it so that it's reasonable. I think what folks need to understand, because you probably hear the same things we do. Look at the traffic on 95. I hear you, but that's ITD. That's not within our jurisdiction. Well, what about the other roads? Well, you have highway districts. You elect highway district commissioners. You have fire district commissioners. Idaho government is highly decentralized, and I think that's a frustration for a lot of folks, because the decision making is not necessarily centered within a single organization. So we work with these groups. The other thing that we're addressing is, and I don't know that this actually helps us manage growth, but maybe redirect it, if you will. If you look at our growth, the single largest segment of transplants is over the age of 60. And last year, the fastest growing segment was over the age of 65. Well, the problem with that is they're not the job creators. So what have we done? We as a county last year decided to partner with an organization called CGI, which goes out and recruits companies who are willing to advertise on our website. And they go right across the spectrum. It could be restaurant, retail, real estate, whatever. And in so doing, what happens is they will place a link on our website, and in addition, they'll create a handful of videos for the county. The point being, we're trying to reach out to a younger demographic. And if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to create the job base to accommodate the growth. Growth is interesting, because if growth continues with just the big money that's coming in from retirees, some of whom have healthy, if you will, public pensions, then what happens is we force up the real estate prices, and the younger people who aren't making the wages are unable to buy. So the idea is to try to balance that growth by recruiting a younger demographic and those that will create jobs. As far as actually limiting growth, I don't know that anyone can do that. The only way that occurs is by having the other taxing districts, like highway districts, having the necessary guidelines in place so that when subdivisions are approved, we don't create undue burdens. We had a situation before us, for example, a couple of weeks ago, where we were considering a subdivision on the east side of the lake. And it wasn't massive, but it would have been, I think it was approximately 25 properties. But when you look at Route 97, the question has to be asked, can that road accommodate that level of growth? And it was a very high turnout for the hearing. I think we had 60 or 70 people, most of them opposed. And we took a vote, and we turned it down. And for different reasons, perhaps. But one of the considerations was the load on that road, among other things. So there's one case where we had to address the growth question, but fundamentally, it's a question of perhaps maybe redirecting the growth.
And there is a big balance with affordability and growth. If you do measures that restrict growth, and it goes back to economics 101,
absolutely.
Right? If you reduce supply and your demand is up here, the price just goes up. So it takes a lot of work to properly manage growth and to keep things affordable, and that's maybe one of the biggest issues that I hear, besides traffic. We hear traffic issues, but the affordability. And people are saying, gosh, I want my kids to come and move back home, but they can't afford a house.
And that was actually highlighted in the Real Estate Market Forum that's conducted annually. This year it was in Spokane, where they address the real estate markets in Spokane County, and then Boundary, Bonner, and of course Kootenai. And the average American is paying maybe 2.5 to 3 times their annual salary for a home. We're running over 5 times the annual wage. That's too high. We're out of kilter. So we have this great divergence between housing prices and incomes. Yes, if you're coming in with a nice pension, you're fine. But if you're a young couple and you're trying to make ends meet and trying to buy your home, it's difficult. It's very challenging.
And then the other side of it is that our construction industry is still a major part of our economy. And if you do things that limit growth, you're going to limit construction.
That is correct.
What happens to those jobs? So it's not to say that we don't do anything about growth, but you're spot on when you say you're not going to. It's difficult to limit growth. You just have to try to manage it and manage the effects of growth.
The effects of growth.
And how it affects traffic, how it affects schools, and we're becoming more and more mindful of that. And Woody, I think this is such a great show. I think we should go on for a little bit more.
I have a couple more questions.
Yeah, go right ahead. I'm fine.
So along those lines, you've been in real estate. So you talk about people owning homes, and as I remember as a younger person, it wasn't about owning. You were trying to figure out your work, try and make as much money as you can, and you had to live somewhere. Mm-hmm. So there's a rental side to the world that all we seem to hear about is the purchase side. But there are apartments, and there's a portion of people that seem to make apartments like bad and high crime, and I don't remember that as a younger person trying to find your way, trying different things. Does that fit into that, what the rent is compared to what you can buy something for?
Yeah, and rents are definitely increasing. That's another challenge. And there are some folks who can afford $1,400 or $1,500 a month, but can't necessarily qualify for a mortgage. It's two different things, right? Because for a mortgage, you need a down payment, unless you manage to qualify for like a USDA loan type of a thing. So the demand for housing is there. The rents are still increasing. I think it's hard to say where you hit the crossroads. I mean, when you get to a point where prices exceed people's ability to pay, now you go into what's historically referred to as a housing slowdown or recession. So the demand for housing is there, whether it's owning your own home or renting, but I think it's a challenge either way. And yes, we are building a lot of apartments, which just seems to address the demand. What's interesting is that Kootenai County is considered the 5th fastest growing county in the U.S. And Idaho last year, 2018, tied with Nevada as the fastest growing state in the nation. I think we were the only two that hit or exceeded a 2% growth rate for that year. So back to the question of growth and how do we accommodate it? I think one of the challenges that we have as a board is that people say, well, do you have a strategic plan? And the answer typically from most board, whether they be current or former commissioners, is how? If you're turning them over every 2 or 4 years, how are you going to implement a plan for anything, facilities, growth, whatever? There should be one, but but how do we bind a future board? So if this board creates a 5-year strategic plan that says this is how we'll accommodate the growth, these are our plans, next board comes in and says and tosses it. Nah, we're not going to buy into it. We're not going to waste our time.
Yeah, that brings us to another subject of your structure.
Yes.
Of the way the county structures compared to cities, getting to know everybody. Do you see that as you just said it, every 2 years you're turning and burning and changing the mix, right? Because of 3. Is that just the way it is? Is that just state? Is it that way everywhere? Or is there potential for other ways or more efficient? And you come from the outside world, you come in here and you go, oh, this could be done a whole lot better or safer or easier. Mm-hmm. Your take on that? Or
State statute allows counties to organize one of two ways. What I would call the traditional, which is what we have today with 3 county commissioners, or you can go to a county administrator or county manager form of government, which I think they refer to as streamline. And you might recall that was attempted back in 2012 under the Dan Green, Todd Tondy, Jay Nelson board. It went to a public referendum, and it was defeated 2-1. What's interesting about that structure is people will often accuse government of not being as efficient as private industry. Okay, so let's take that as an example. How's private industry organized? You have a CEO, we have a board of directors, they hire a CEO has VPs, the buck stops with him, right? Or her, as the case may be. Well, when you look at our structure, every decision that's made, contractual, financial, comes before we 3. Right. We are not structured like private industry. If we were, and the state allows for this, we would have a county manager, a county administrator that would be hired by county commissioners who at that point would be part-time. You wouldn't have 3 full-time, you'd have 5 or 7, depending on how we were to do it, who would be working part-time. So maybe we'd meet 1 night a week, greatly reduced income, and you'd have a county manager. Now, how does that function? Well, one of the prescriptions that I've heard is some of what are now currently elected officials would report to that county manager, so they would essentially be hired or appointed. Oh. And those would be coroner, assessor, treasurer,
clerk.
And clerk, thank you. People would continue to elect prosecutor and sheriff, and of course the county commissioners. So that would more mirror the structure of private enterprise. Unfortunately, one of the arguments against that you'll hear from most people is we don't want that, we want to elect our leaders. Well, okay, but you're electing the county commissioners who are hiring or appointing the county manager. Currently, and I don't want to sound as though I'm making the case for this. No. I'm simply trying to point out, these are the arguments. If you look at county structure for the most part in Idaho, there is not a single county that has a county administrator. None. 6 of us are considered urban counties, and it would be Ada, Canyon, Bonneville, Bannock, Twin, Kootenai. Now, Kootenai's the 3rd largest, so I didn't actually name them in order. So these are considered urban counties. A former county commissioner and now working for ICRIMP, he's a former Bonner County commissioner, made the comment, he said, if you're one of the 38 counties that are largely agricultural, you'd be foolish to have a county administrator. But if you're one of the 6 that are urban, you're foolish not to. Now, I'm simply someone's going to walk away from this interview and say, see what Fillios? No, Fillios is pointing out the arguments and the realities of both sides. If you're an agricultural county, you don't need a county administrator. Right. Does Kootenai? Well, back to strategic planning. If you're turning over county commissioners, but you have consistency in a county manager, you have continuity. So you can implement those plans. Now, you can fire the county administrator. Sure. But if you have 5 or 7 commissioners, you're going to need a vote of 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 7 to do that. So it gets more difficult. So there are arguments both ways. Sure. The classic argument that I hear for maintaining the current structure is, by golly, we want to elect our county commissioners. We want them to run the county. Mm-hmm. And that's the classic argument.
And we kind of look at our city that way, right?
Yeah.
It's, they elect us to make the decisions. Mm-hmm. And the decisions trickle all the way down, right? And you, as a mayor, have kind of an oversight.
But you have Troy ensuring that consistency.
He's the day-to-day.
Yeah. We're operating as day-to-day.
Yeah.
So we can go into a meeting and somebody says, I've got to sign this contract, I've got this $5,000 expenditure, and sometimes I'll go in thinking, why are we doing this? We have more important things to worry about, but that's the way it's defined.
Right. We're more on the policy guys, so.
Right. Well, thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
Chris.
Anytime.
A great show, and thank you very much for all your leadership in the county.
Thank you.
And thank you, especially for fostering such a great relationship between the city and the county.
It's our pleasure. We're here to serve you. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Woody.
You're welcome.
And thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time on Coffee with the Mayor.
We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Coffee with the Mayor. Plan to join us for future programs where Mayor Steve Widmyer takes a break and sits down to discuss issues of community interest. We would like to take this chance to thank the following sponsors for their support: Rustler's Roost and Spectrum Cable. So brew a pot of your favorite blend and sit down with us next time when we once again have Coffee with the Mayor.